Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Our lead story tonight is about food. Prices continue to rise the world over. In India, the government is dipping into its reserves to stabilize prices. It has restricted the exports of rice, wheat and sugar over the past few months. It may remove or reduce tax on imports too. Now, these are significant steps. They point to the global shortage because of conflict and supply disruptions. Some friendly countries are reaching out to New Delhi to make exceptions for them. Tonight, we'll discuss how India can balance its national interest with its international responsibility as a major supplier of food. Meanwhile, in New Delhi, the government has won a no-confidence vote. Prime Minister Modi addressed the parliament in a speech that lasted more than 2 hours. We'll bring you the highlights. In Pakistan, a leaked document has put the spotlight on America's role in Imran Khan's ouster. In North Korea, Kim Jong-un has fired his top general and asked his army to prepare for war. In Washington, Joe Biden has passed an executive order to ban investments in China's technology sector. In Germany, there's a debate on the hair and makeup bill of their chancellor. It's way too high. And a question that bothers all of us. How many steps should you walk in a day? A new study is out. We'll bring you the findings, the headlines first. Russia halts currency buys as the ruble tumbles. Its central bank stops the purchase of foreign currency in the domestic market. The move comes after the ruble fell sharply in recent weeks. It is at its lowest level against the US dollar since March 2022. Niger's coup leaders form a new government. Prime Minister Ali Mehman Zen will lead the 21-member government. The junta will lead the defense and interior ministries. The military leader seized power in a coup last month. Tensions between France and Mali escalate. Both countries suspend visas to each other's citizens. Paris has already withdrawn its military from its former ally. France and Mali fell out after the military seized power in Bamako in 2020. A man who threatened US President Joe Biden has been shot dead. Craig Robertson was killed at his home in Utah by the FBI. He had posted violent threats against Biden on Facebook. The incident comes ahead of a scheduled visit by the US President to Utah. And Kuwait bans the Barbie movie, saying it is to protect quote-unquote public ethics and social traditions. A Lebanese minister also wants the film banned in his country. He claims it promotes homosexuality. A few weeks ago, we showed you some pictures. Indian Americans were hoarding rice. They were panic buying. Grocery stores were running out of stocks. Some stores even had to ration sales. They had to impose limits on how much you can buy. There was a shortage of rice. And now it is spreading. Prices have shot up the world over, the highest in 12 years. There are reports of Indian expats in the UAE hoarding rice. Many are flying back with packets of their favorite rice brands from India. And here in India, the government is stepping in. It wants to avoid mass hoarding. It has decided to release surplus supplies. The government is in fact releasing 5 million metric tons of wheat and 2.5 tons of rice. 2.5 million tons of rice, rather. This is from the reserve stock. It's being released to keep the prices stable. But one intervention may not be enough. Global food markets are in turmoil. Prices have already touched record highs. Experts say they'll keep going up. So India has a tough balancing act to do, stabilize prices at home while tackling requests for exports. Last month, some curbs were imposed. But there is no total ban yet. Tonight, we'll tell you how India is navigating this crisis. We'll start with the global picture. Food prices are up. The United Nations has an estimate. The UN's Food and Agriculture Organization, or FAO, runs an index. It is called the Food Price Index. It tracks changes in global prices, and it says prices increased by 1.3% in July. And this was the first uptick since April this year. It was driven largely by one factor: high prices of rice and vegetable oil. What is causing this? The UN mostly blames the war in Ukraine and the collapse of the grain deal with Russia. They say the problem is not in production. The problem is the restricted supply. I have a quote from the chief economist of this UN body. While the world has adequate food supplies, challenges to supplies from major producers due to conflict, export restrictions, or weather-induced production shortfalls can lead to supply and demand imbalances across regions. That will lead to a lack of food access because of increasing prices and potential food insecurity. This is what the United Nations has said. India too is feeling the pinch. We don't have the July numbers yet, but estimates suggest inflation remained above 6% in July in India. So it's still not under control. India's Reserve Bank wants to see inflation at 4%. Right now, it is more than 6%. Food prices account for nearly half of India's inflation basket. And just like the rest of the world, food prices are driving up India's inflation. Wheat prices are at a 6-month high. They have increased by nearly 18% in the past 4 months. Same with rice. Last month, the price of Indian rice in the global market went up by 10%. Which brings us to yesterday's announcement, India's decision to dip into its food stocks, the decision to release some of the surplus supplies. It will be sold in the open market. This decision is based on the law of supply and demand. The government wants to increase supply to stabilize demand and to push down the prices. That's the hope. Now, this effort has been on for months now. Last summer, India banned the export of wheat. Then it imposed a cap on sugar exports. More recently, the export of non-basmati white rice was curbed. Reports say India could also reconsider the tax on importing wheat. We've told you about this. Right now, there's a 40% tax on wheat imports in India. India could reduce or remove it altogether. All these steps should help the situation at home. But India also has an international responsibility. It's a leading exporter of food. India is the world's largest exporter of rice and the second largest producer of wheat. So when Indian supplies go out of the market, the world feels the impact. New Delhi has started receiving requests. Bhutan wants to import Indian rice. It has made a formal request. It wants to be exempted from India's bans. In the month of June, 4 countries made similar requests. Indonesia, Senegal, Nepal and Gambia. They wanted wheat and rice supplies from India and India agreed. But can it continue doing this if supplies at home come under strain? You see, food prices are increasing everywhere. Let me in fact show you some numbers from June. In the UK, food prices have gone up by more than 17%. In Japan, almost 9%. France, over 14%. And the US, 5.7%. So India is not an exception, although it is faring better than most. The key is to manage the supplies, to keep the kiranas well stocked at home, while also helping friends overseas. And staying with India, Prime Minister Modi faced a no-trust vote today. He sailed through easily, but the process itself is very consequential. A no-trust vote is moved to remove the government from power, to topple them. But how did things come to that? And how does a no-trust vote happen? We'll explain in the next couple of minutes. The monsoon session of India's parliament is currently underway, but very little work has been done. And why is that? Because of what's happening in Manipur. The opposition wanted a statement from the Prime Minister. They wanted him to speak on the violence. When that did not happen, they moved a no-confidence motion. It was proposed by the Congress party on the 26th of July. Now, this motion has 2 conditions. One, it can only be introduced in the Lok Sabha, which is the lower house of India's parliament. And 2, a minimum of 50 members must support it, 50 members. If not, the motion will not be accepted. In this case, the opposition had the required numbers. So the no-confidence motion was introduced. That's the first step. The second step is the debate. Lawmakers from the opposition and the government will speak. So will the Prime Minister. India's constitution says the Prime Minister is the head of the government. So when MPs move a no-confidence motion, he or she must speak. It's a legal obligation. The PM has to speak when there is a no-confidence motion. This debate can go on for hours or days. The one in 2018 lasted around 12 hours. The one in 2003 lasted 21 hours. And how long did this one last? Well, the Speaker had set aside 12 hours. Today, it was Prime Minister Modi's turn to speak. Listen to what he said on Manipur.
महिलाओं के साथ गंभीर अपराध हुआ और ये अपराध अक्षम्य है और दोषियों को कड़ी से कड़ी सजा दिलवाने के लिए केंद्र सरकार, राज्य सरकार मिलकर के भरपूर प्रयास कर रही है और मैं देश के सभी नागरिकों को आश्वस्त करना चाहता हूं कि जिस प्रकार से प्रयास चल रहे हैं, निकट भविष्य में शांति का सूरज जरूर उगेगा। मणिपुर फिर एक बार नए आत्मविश्वास के साथ आगे बढ़ेगा। मैं मणिपुर के लोगों से भी आग्रहपूर्वक कहना चाहता हूं, वहां की माताओं, बहनों, बेटियों से कहना चाहता हूं, देश आपके साथ है।
Now, today was day 3 of the proceedings. Yesterday, Home Minister Amit Shah spoke for nearly 2 hours. He detailed the situation in Manipur. Opposition leader Rahul Gandhi also spoke yesterday. He accused the government of being complicit in the violence. So, put together, more than a dozen MPs spoke. The final statement was the Prime Minister, sort of like a reply to the motion. He spoke for 2 hours and 13 minutes today. 2 hours, 13 minutes. Many of the opposition MPs staged a walkout during his speech. After everyone spoke, it was time to vote. The current government has a comfortable majority in parliament. The BJP, which is the Prime Minister's party, has 301 lawmakers. Their allies have 31. And what is the majority mark? 270 based on the current occupancy. So the motion was never expected to succeed. And that's also what happened today. The no confidence motion was defeated in a voice vote. In fact, it's never succeeded, not once in history. This was the 28th no confidence motion in India's Lok Sabha. All of them have failed, all 28 of them. Governments have lost floor tests in the past, but they have never lost no trust votes. Prime Minister Modi faced a similar test in 2018 as well. Back then, he got the support of 330 MPs. So if no confidence motions never succeed, why do parties bother to send a political message? It's about checks, not threats. It also offers the parliament an opportunity to debate a wide range of issues. You see, the motion was introduced because of Manipur. But once introduced, everything is on the table. MPs can talk about any issue in the country. The Prime Minister did that today. He mentioned how global agencies have praised India's growth model, but the opposition remains in denial. He also had some taunts for the opposition. Listen to this.
मैंने 2018 में उनको काम दिया था कि 2023 में आप अविश्वास प्रस्ताव लेकर, और मेरी बात मानी उन्होंने। लेकिन मुझे दुख इस बात का है कि 18 के बाद 23 में 5 साल मिले थे, थोड़ा अच्छा करते, अच्छे ढंग से करते, लेकिन तैयारी बिल्कुल नहीं थी, कोई इनोवेशन नहीं था, कोई क्रिएटिविटी नहीं थी, न मुद्दे खोज पा रहे थे। पता नहीं, ये देश को इन्होंने बहुत निराश किया है राष्ट्र। चलिए, कोई बात नहीं, 2028 में हम फिर से मौका देंगे। IMF ने भारत के डीबीटी के और दूसरे हमारे सोशल वेलफेयर स्कीम के लिए IMF ने इसे कहा है, ये लॉजिस्टिकल मार्वल है। आदरणीय अध्यक्ष जी, WHO ने कहा है, आदरणीय अध्यक्ष जी, वर्ल्ड हेल्थ ऑर्गेनाइजेशन ने कहा है कि जल जीवन मिशन के जरिए भारत में 4 लाख लोगों की जान बच रही है। ये 4 लाख कौन है? तो मेरे गरीब, पीड़ित, शोषित, वंचित परिवारों के मेरे स्वजन है। हमारे परिवार के निचले तबके में जिंदगी गुजारने के लिए जो मजबूर हुए, उनके जन हैं।
India's politics is certainly heating up. Next year, of course, is the big test. The country will be holding its general elections in April 2024, and that will be the real trust vote. India's neighbour too had a no-trust vote. This was last year. Opposition parties ganged up to remove Pakistan's then Prime Minister Imran Khan. They succeeded. But Imran Khan was not one to give up. He accused the United States of toppling his government. He went after the army. All of this was dismissed as conspiracy theories, as signs of desperation. But could there be more to these claims? Since August last year, Imran Khan has been talking about a cipher, a secret document. This cipher allegedly had details of a conversation. Between whom? Pakistan's ambassador to the US and senior officials at the US State Department. This claim was also dismissed, but now the alleged cipher has been leaked. Someone in the Pakistani military leaked it to the US media. And what does it say? What Imran Khan has been saying all along. The story begins on March 7th, 2022. State Department officials had a conversation with Pakistan's ambassador. This man, Asad Majid Khan. Here's what the Americans allegedly said. I think if the no confidence vote against Prime Minister succeeds, all will be forgiven in Washington. Otherwise, I think it would be tough going ahead. Some context now. Why did the Americans want Imran Khan out? Apparently because he was neutral on Ukraine. Under Imran Khan, Pakistan refused to condemn Russia's war. He said Pakistan is not Europe's slave. In fact, Imran Khan was on a trip to Moscow when the war began. Washington saw this as an affront, a sign that Imran Khan would side with Moscow. Is that why they plotted to remove him? The timing is certainly suspect. 1 month after the cipher was delivered, Imran Khan was ousted. Plus, toppling regimes is not exactly new for America. They're more than capable of it. But a couple of questions still remain. Number one, what did Washington gain from this alleged regime change? Not very much on paper. In February this year, the West moved a UN resolution against Russia. It criticized Moscow's land grabs. 32 countries abstained. 32 countries, including Pakistan. And remember, this was not Imran Khan. This was a new government under Shehbaz Sharif in Pakistan. Also, Pakistan is buying oil from Russia. The first shipment arrived in June. It was carrying around 45,000 tons of crude. So where exactly is the upside? There are reports of Pakistan sending weapons to Ukraine, but these are shadow shipments, negligible compared to NATO's multi-billion-dollar aid. So that's one problem with the cipher claim. The second one is the timing. Pakistan's parliament dissolved today. The stage is set for the general election. But as things stand, Imran Khan won't be contesting. He's been convicted and jailed in a corruption case. So by extension, he cannot contest. In the middle of all of this chaos, the cipher gets leaked. Sounds convenient, doesn't it? Right on time to vindicate Imran Khan. Now, I'm not saying the cipher is fake or that America is not capable of doing all of this. I'm saying there are too many loose ends here. If the US was still involved in Afghanistan, this would have made more sense. Pakistan is a direct player there in Afghanistan, so a friendly regime in Islamabad would be helpful. But for Ukraine, it seems a bit far-fetched. Why then does the cipher controversy refuse to die? Because of an old saying, there is no smoke without fire. Listen to the US response and you will see why.
Even if those comments were accurate as reported, they in no way show the United States taking a position on who the leader of Pakistan ought to be. We expressed concern privately to the government of Pakistan, as we expressed concern publicly about the visit of then Prime Minister Khan to Moscow on the very day of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. We made that concern quite clear, but as the former Pakistani ambassador to the United States himself has stated, the allegations that the United States has interfered in internal decisions about the leadership of Pakistan are false. As we've stated, they're false. They've always been false, and they remain false.
That's a pretty defensive statement. The US says we can't talk about private diplomatic chats. Fair enough. But the spokesperson adds a rider. He says, even if the cipher is real, we did not say who should be Pakistan's leader. Well, that's the money quote. Maybe the State Department did not say who the leader should be, but they did say who the leader should not be. Pakistan's position on the cipher is also ambiguous. They have neither accepted nor rejected it. Islamabad has simply ignored it, as if the conversation never happened. So in conclusion, let me say this. A few things are definitely not adding up here. The US would have certainly liked to see Imran Khan out. But would they have actively pushed for it? That is the real question. And if they did, why go through the ambassador? Why not use more covert means? I'm sure the CIA has a back channel with the army. Wouldn't that have been safer? No Cipher business, just good old American meddling. The fact is, Imran Khan was always going to be ousted. America was not his biggest enemy. The Pakistani army was. So maybe this was a classic case of interests aligning, a happy coincidence, or maybe it's all a bunch of conspiracies. Unfortunately, in Pakistan, you can never know. From one unstable government to another, let's talk about North Korea. Their supreme leader Kim Jong-un seems to be unhappy. He has dismissed his top military general and he has called for the mass production of weapons and equipment. Kim said the same thing last weekend as well. He went on a tour of multiple weapons factories and perhaps decided that his top general was not doing enough to boost firepower. So he has brought back an old face. A former chief of general staff is back at the helm in Pyongyang. His name is Ri Yong-gil. He has served as the top general twice before, also as defense minister and social security minister. Yesterday's reshuffle is the latest in the merry-go-round that is North Korea's government. Our next report tells you what it means.
If there's one thing that's certain, it's that a Kim will be leading North Korea. But that's about the only thing that's certain when it comes to North Korean politics. Because the present Supreme Kim, Kim Jong-un, is known to be a bit temperamental. He's quick to dismiss senior leaders and keep shuffling his deck of generals every few months. That's exactly what took place yesterday. Kim Jong-un held a meeting of North Korea's Central Military Commission. The country's state media released pictures of the affair. Cigarette in hand, Kim blew smoke on North Korea's current military order and decided he wanted an overhaul. General Park Soo-il is out. He barely lasted 7 months. It seems his work didn't please Supreme Leader Kim. Looks like Kim has some grand plans. Plans that seem similar to what he always says, but somehow this time it's different. Kim issued a diktat during the meeting. He wants a boost in weapons production, an expansion of military drills, and more preparations for the possibility of war. This call for military readiness comes on the heels of his latest factory tour. Between last Thursday and Saturday, Kim took stock of North Korea's weapons factories. He conducted his inspections clad in a white coat with white pants that take you back to the disco era and a jaunty white cap. In this imposing attire, Kim was shown test firing some rifles. He was surrounded by military personnel, some of whom were in uniform, others who were inspired by Kim's summer wardrobe. So the rigorous military inspection looked like a crossover between a Korean Miami Vice and Full Metal Jacket. And whatever this enigmatic inspection revealed, it can't have been good news for the top general. Now we know General Park Soo-il has been booted, but that's all we know for now. By design, North Korean state media is rarely very informative. But what it has told us is the name of the new top commander. It's Vice Marshal Ri Yong-gil. Or should we say, it's Ri Yong-gil again. This man has been around the block a few times, and maybe even escaped the chopping block. We'll come to that in a moment. Ri has served as the Chief of the General Staff of the Korean People's Army twice before, reportedly from August 2013 to January 2016, and from June 2018 to September 2019. We should clarify that this is to the best of our knowledge. North Korea isn't known for sharing accurate information. But if true, this means Ri served as the top general for almost 4 years. That's almost twice as long as anyone else. You see, top generals don't really last long on the Kim Jong-un carousel. As we mentioned, the newly demoted Park lasted for about 7 months. His predecessor lasted for 6. The one before that, 9 months. So you can see the top military job isn't for those with a long-term career in mind. But it seems Ri has the Supreme King's favor. He's been given a 3rd chance to helm North Korea's armed forces. Second to Kim, of course, but it's an important position nonetheless. One that reportedly almost got him killed after his first stint. In 2016, South Korea had reported that Ri had been executed. Seoul said the then general was killed for corruption and forming a political faction. But it turns out Ri was just sacked, not shot. Either South Korea's information was incorrect, or he found a way to appease the overlord Kim. Since then, he has served as North Korea's Social Security Minister and then its Defense Minister. And it seems the Supreme Kim has turned to him once again to oversee more weapons production, military drills, and war preparation. And military parades, of course. After sharing the news about Ri's promotion, North Korean media spoke about the new parade coming up. It's on September 9th. But Ri has his task cut out. If he fails, who knows where Kim Jong-un's cabinet carousel will fling him next.
Now let's talk about North Korea's arch rival, the United States of America. There's a presidential election next year in the US and Joe Biden is vying for a second term. He doesn't want to leave anything to chance, so he's turning to the Trump playbook. Biden is taking a tougher line against China. He has signed a new executive order. It bans new investments in China's high-tech sector. Americans won't be able to fund projects in China. Biden has a new slogan for investors. He wants them to invest in America.
Instead of exporting American jobs, we're creating American jobs, and we're exporting American products.
So that is Biden's new sales pitch. Sounds a lot like protectionism, but he's hoping this will get him re-elected. The pretext of this executive order is national security. But the fact is, the US doesn't want China to have an edge. He doesn't want China to make better semiconductors or chips, quantum computers, or steal the march in artificial intelligence. So Biden has blocked American funding to these projects. When do these curbs kick in? Next year. And what about previous investments? Well, they won't be impacted. Biden's executive order only applies to future investments. And yet, the current investors might be compelled to change their mind because the US and China are fighting a trade war. If you are an investor in America, putting money on China is risky now. American venture funding has declined dramatically. In the last quarter of 2021, more than $40 billion were invested, 40 billion in one quarter. 2 years later, this number has dropped by more than 50%. In the second quarter of this year, just $10.5 billion were invested. The trade restrictions have had a serious impact. The US already bans or restricts certain exports to China. The curbs were introduced last year. They were targeted at the semiconductor industry. Chip exports were restricted and high-tech chip exports were banned from America to China. Chinese manufacturers were also denied chip design software and manufacturing equipment and related components. So Biden is now going after the money. What does he hope to achieve from this? Besides, of course, blocking China's rise and perhaps an election win, Biden is looking at national security. You see, Washington believes that some technologies can dramatically shift the balance of power. US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan has a term for this. He calls them, quote-unquote, force multipliers, these technologies, force multipliers. Modern-day innovations fall in this category. There are chips in every electronic device today. They can also be installed in weapon systems. Same with artificial intelligence. The world is worried about the military applications of AI. Last month, the UN Security Council discussed it. The prospect of robot soldiers is scary and not far-fetched anymore. The US is exploring possibilities and so is China. Let me show you something, in fact. In 2021, the Global Times put out this story. It announced that the PLA, the Chinese army, is using artificial intelligence. It hasn't entered the battlefield yet, but the technology is being used in training. The Chinese Air Force used AI in aerial combat training. How does it work? Well, China took the pilot out of the cockpit and let artificial intelligence fly the fighters. There was no dogfight in the air with robots. The PLA ran simulations in cockpits. A real pilot went up against an AI aircraft, and in this instance, the pilot came out on top. The Chinese military hailed the advantages of AI after this. The Global Times reported that such trainings can boost efficiency, reduce cost, and minimize risk. China is studying military applications of artificial intelligence. America wants to slow them down, and they are in a position to do so. You see, China still lacks the know-how. It doesn't know chip design. It still lags behind America in AI. China has bought many high-tech goods from the US. It has relied on American funding to make progress, but now the US is turning off all those taps. Obviously, Beijing does not like it. They've issued a statement. China said it was very disappointed by Joe Biden's orders. It is also hinting at retaliatory measures. We haven't heard the last of this. In 2022, a man from Ohio shot his neighbor. Why? Because he was a conservative and he thought that his neighbor was a Democrat. This is a tragic case, but it's not an isolated one. This is the story of America today. It is more polarized than ever before, and frankly, it has been like that for quite some time. Political violence is not new, but in the US, it has been at an all-time high since 1970. Since 2021, 39 people have been killed because of political violence. And the numbers are only rising. Our next report tells you about America's growing political violence and how the US is more divided than ever before.
Butler County 911, where's your emergency?
My name is Kristen King.
All right, Kristen.
My husband was just shot.
That was Kristen King calling 911. Her next door neighbor had come over. Sounds like an everyday thing, right? But then the unthinkable happened. Her neighbor shot her husband in the backyard. Why? Because the neighbor was a conservative and he believed her husband was a Democrat. Political violence in America is not new, but it's definitely on the rise. This case was, however, not the only one. There have been 200 more across the US since 2021, an indication that the country is more divided than ever. The rhetoric surged mostly during the Trump era. It reached a peak after the 2021 Capitol riots. Donald Trump lost the 2020 election. He falsely claimed that the vote was stolen, and many of them still believe it.
Take that house! Take it now!
Many hoped that by 2024, things would cool down, that the rhetoric would die down. But it has only become more heated. The violence has killed at least 39 people, roiled aspects of American life, disrupted gatherings, and turned neighbors into enemies. Some of these deaths followed one-on-one disputes, like this fatal brawl in Florida. The two men were arguing over Trump. Others happened at public gatherings, like the mass shooting in Portland. A Reuters investigation tracked violence in America, and here are the figures. Since 2021, there have been 213 cases of political violence. 2/3 of those cases were physical assaults and/or even confrontations. A third involved property damage, and 76 were individual acts of violence, aka lone assailants. This is not the first time America has seen political violence. It surged in the 1970s. 1970 alone saw more than 450 cases. But that was different. In 1970, American political violence focused largely on destroying property. There were attacks on government buildings, bombings. The idea was not to kill people. But today, it's very different. Political violence has surged to its highest levels since 1970. And the main target are people. There have been 14 fatal political attacks since the Capitol riots. 13 of them were right-wing and 1 was on the left. So the people who commit the violence are divided, but so is the violence that is committed. There have been mainly 2 types of violence. Fatal violence, like killings and shootings, which are mostly associated to those on the right. Then there is property violence, burnt cars, damaged property, and they are perpetrated more by people on the left. So America is in a very divisive period. Its political rhetoric pitching people against people, neighbor against neighbor. The US has always had political opponents, but they are no longer divided by their views on issues. Instead, you have people on both sides demonizing each other, calling each other traitors, and in the worst case, even killing each other. America is in the grips of unprecedented political violence, its worst since 1970. And it's unlikely to change anytime soon.
What makes a good politician? Policies, yes. Oratory, yes. But what about looks? For the longest time, leaders were supposed to look ordinary, like an average Joe. But that's not the case anymore. Today's politicians are splurging on hair and makeup, and the bills are eye-wateringly big. Germany has released some numbers. Their government has spent $68,000 on Chancellor Olaf Scholz's hair and makeup. $68,000, that's around 56 lakh Indian rupees on hair and makeup. We have 4 months left in this year, so expect that bill to increase even more. Now, hair and makeup is just one part of it. The total expenditure is much higher, around $1.6 million in 2022. Imagine that, $1.6 million for makeup, hairdressers and photographers. Now, before you ask, this is for the entire German government, not just Olaf Scholz. But still, it's a big number. Even Angela Merkel's makeup bill is borne by the government. She retired from politics in 2021. Since then, guess how much money Germany has spent on her makeup? Around $60,000. Private events, public events, it doesn't matter. The German government picked up the tab. What do the people make of this? The German Taxpayers Association has criticized the bills. They said it should be at a bare minimum, and yet nothing has changed. In fact, the bills are rising even more. The German government's makeup bill was 80% higher in 2022, 80% higher in 2022 compared to 2021. And Germany is not alone in this trend. World leaders apparently love their makeup. French President Emmanuel Macron is one example. He was elected to office in 2017. In the first 3 months, listen to this, he spent $30,000 on his makeup. That's around 19 lakh rupees in 3 months. So the next time you see Macron's youthful, wrinkle-free face, remember this, it costs $30,000. The whole thing triggered a backlash. Macron ended up promising to cut his makeup budget. His predecessor spent even more. That's François Hollande. He used to pay his hairdresser $10,000 per month. It's bad enough for most people. Even worse if you're a socialist leader. Donald Trump did something similar. He spent around $10,000 for makeup for his inauguration. But I must say, Trump got a better deal. He got makeup for himself and 20 of his aides. Ireland too had a makeup-savvy leader, Bertie Ahern. He was Prime Minister from 1997 to 2008. His makeup bill was released in 2006, around $100,000 for 4 years. In fact, Bertie Ahern was called the L'Oreal Prime Minister. We tried to find numbers in India as well. I'm sure you're thinking about those. Unfortunately, there is no public record. But the bigger question is this: why do leaders do this? Why do they spend tens of thousands of dollars on makeup? I'm sure the reasons are different for everyone, but press coverage is a common one. You have high-definition cameras following you. They can capture everything, a wrinkle on your face, a strand of grey hair, a pimple, all of it. So makeup is the only way to appear perfect, to look youthful on television. If you don't, the cameras will spot it. Look at what happened with Joe Biden earlier this year. People noticed some odd marks on his face and immediately questions were raised. The White House had to clarify that the president uses a sleep apnea machine. Maybe Biden needed a makeup artist to cover it up. And let's be clear here, makeup is not the problem. People are free to use cosmetic products or employ hairdressers. It's their choice. The problem is, who pays for it? It's one thing to pay for a leader's motorcade or housing. It's another to pay for their makeup, especially when the bills are so high. In the US, women spend around $15,000 on makeup. That's over a lifetime. $15,000 in Indian money, it's around 12 lakh rupees. But some world leaders are spending as much in months. So clearly it is excessive. We do need active and caring politicians. For that, taxpayers will pick up the tab. But if they want to splurge on looks, I'm afraid it's BYOM, bring your own makeup. Our next story comes from the South American nation of Ecuador, a country of about 17 million people. Its capital city is called Quito, and it has been rocked by an assassination. A presidential candidate has been shot dead at a campaign rally. 9 others were injured. One suspected assassin was also killed. He succumbed to injuries from a shootout. 6 other suspects have been arrested. A criminal gang has claimed responsibility for the assassination. It's called Los Lobos. It means the wolves. This is the the second largest gang in Ecuador. It is affiliated with the Mexican drug cartel. The assassination comes days before the presidential election. It's scheduled for the 20th of August. The outgoing president, Guillermo Lasso, said the killing was a clear attempt to sabotage the election. He has promised that polls will go ahead as planned, but amid a national state of emergency. Here's a report.
The South American nation of Ecuador has been rocked by violence of late. And last night, the violence claimed another victim. This is Fernando Villavicencio. He was one of the leading candidates for the upcoming presidential election. But late last night, he was assassinated.
I was behind my brother, and at that moment, it was like a glowworm of bullets. A friend that was with me was also shot, and I said, I'm going to talk with Fernando. It was like 100 shots, like lights. I went to a bathroom vent, crawling. The shooting lasted for long.
Villavicencio was killed while leaving a campaign rally. He was leaving a school building when he was shot. Multiple bullets were fired. One of the suspects, reportedly the shooter, was killed as well. Ecuadorian authorities have arrested 6 other suspects. This was after raids around the capital, Quito. Now, a gang has claimed responsibility for the murder, Los Lobos. It's the second largest gang in Ecuador and counts 8,000 among its ranks. Ecuador's outgoing president said it was an attack on the democratic process.
Este es un crimen político.
This is a political crime. It has the character of terrorism, and we do not doubt that this murder is an attempt to sabotage the electoral process.
El proceso electoral.
Villavicencio was campaigning on an anti-corruption platform. He was also a vocal critic of the drug cartels that have been taking over Ecuador, and he had warned that they wanted him out of the way.
The country knew through the media of a police report in which it's revealed a very serious threat of one of the Sinaloa cartel's boss, I'm referring to alias Tito, against me and my campaign team. There was a warning that if I kept referring to him and his structure, they would attack me or my life. Drug traffickers and the mafia want to take the political power of the state. And without a doubt, it's not Tito who's behind this threat. It's the political mafias that are behind Tito who is behind this threat against my candidacy.
He said a prominent member of the Sinaloa Mexican cartel was behind threats to his life. But the gang which claims it assassinated him is affiliated to another cartel. Los Lobos have ties to the Jalisco New Generation cartel. It just shows that Villavicencio made a lot of enemies among Ecuador's gangs. Drug cartels from Mexico and Colombia have been operating in Ecuador in recent years. And Ecuador has become a battlefield for the foreign drug cartels. They use the country's Pacific ports to transport drugs to the US and beyond. The cartels lend their support to local gangs like Los Lobos, and these gangs are behind the rising violence in Ecuador. Last month, the mayor of a port city was assassinated. A national emergency was declared because of this. A mayoral candidate in another city was murdered as well. A second emergency was declared last month due to violence within prisons. And now, a third has been put in place to ensure the election goes on as planned.
The second decree is a declaration of a state of emergency for 60 days. From this moment, the armed forces will be mobilized in the whole national territory to guarantee the security of citizens, peace of the country, and free and democratic election on the 20th of August, just like the National Electoral Council has foreseen.
8 people were running for Ecuador's presidency. Now there are 7. Some of the candidates have decided to stop campaigning as a mark of respect for the slain Villavicencio. But to truly respect the fallen candidate, the next president must ensure that his assassins are brought to justice. That gangs like Los Lobos are eradicated and the brazen violence tearing Ecuador apart is put to an end.
"10,000 steps a day. It's touted as the minimum for good health. It has long become a default fitness goal, so much so that it birthed a whole industry. An industry worth about $20 billion. It's filled with fitness trackers, smartphone apps, even wellness programs. But do you follow this number religiously? Do you walk 10,000 steps every day? Probably not. How do we know? Because we have the numbers. Indians typically walk around 4,300 steps in a day. Americans 4,800 steps. The Japanese take 7,000 steps. Australians and Swiss nationals come close. They take some 9,000 steps. This is the average. So chances are you're not clocking in 10,000 steps every day. But there is no need to feel discouraged. I'll let you in on a secret. 10,000 steps is a myth. The number to stay healthy is far lower than that. Let alone half of 10,000, even 2,000 steps are good for you. If that's the case, why is the world being told otherwise? Blame murky historical roots. Let's take you back to the year 1965. That's when a Japanese company launched a pedometer. You know the instrument that records the number of steps taken? It estimates the distance traveled on foot. This Japanese pedometer was called 10,000 step meter. It also came with a slogan, let's walk 10,000 steps a day. What fun. And hence we had the magic number, 10,000 steps. It became trendy. It gave people a distant, sweaty goal, the goal of a fit and healthy body. It became part of everyday conversations, even corporate team building exercises. But you see, this goal is not based in a scientific study. It originated in marketing, not medicine. So what does medicine say? How many steps should you walk in a day? A new global study is out now. It was conducted by the Medical University of Lords and the Johns Hopkins University. It shows that 2 to 5,000 steps, in fact, are beneficial. About 2,300 steps is enough to benefit the heart and blood vessels. At 4,000 steps, the risk of dying prematurely of any cause starts reducing. And with every extra 1,000 steps after 4,000, the risk of dying early reduces by 15%. So basically, there is no one number. The more you walk, the more health benefits you get. This applies to people of all genders, ages, and countries. Such betrayal, right? All this time, people were beating themselves up for walking lesser than 10,000 steps. Some say they don't even bother going for a walk, assuming they won't reach the magic number, so what's the point? But with this study, it's clear that there is a point. Walking 10,000 steps definitely helps, but so does every little bit of walking. It's about small snippets of movement throughout the day, like walking from one room to another or getting up from your desk to get coffee. They all add up to make a difference. Let me show you how. Walking lowers blood pressure, strengthens muscles, protects bones, increases energy levels, boosts happy hormones like endorphins, and this benefits mental health. The best part is, walking is for everyone because it is low impact and easy on the joints. But walking is not the only light exercise that helps. I'm talking about non-exercise activities, meaning simple tasks that use energy, like carrying shopping bags, washing the floor, pacing while talking on the phone. It's ironic, but think of exercising as eating your favorite food. Even a little is good, but more is always better. After all, insufficient physical activity is responsible for more than 3 million deaths every year. It's the 4th most frequent cause of death worldwide, not enough physical activity. It increases the risk of heart disease, stroke, diabetes, and several cancers. And yet people do not exercise enough, and the numbers agree. 1 in 4 adults and 4 out of 5 adolescents do not get enough physical activity. Now, exercising may seem daunting. There is rarely enough time or energy to get started, but remember that good health can be a sum of the small movements. Movement in any form should not be underestimated. So set a goal that works for you. Find your own sweet spot of step count, or throw out your tracker entirely, but just get moving. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. We're starting with the United States. Tourists' paradise Hawaii has become their nightmare. Massive wildfires have broken out. The historic town of Lahaina has been completely devastated. At least 36 people have been killed. Some jumped into the ocean to escape the wildfire. Meanwhile, Formula One world champion Max Verstappen has picked up some new driving tricks. And the United Kingdom had this. A baby elephant rolled in the grass and spent some quality time with its mother. Finally, what makes the 10th of August significant? On this day in 1962, Marvel Comics superhero Spider-Man made his debut. He appeared in the comic book called Amazing Fantasy. This was when Peter Parker came into our lives as a shy and nerdy high school student who secretly fought bad guys. Youngsters loved it. And the rest, as they say, is history. We're leaving you with that. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
This was a home.